The scene that greeted us in the abandoned chapel was a tableau of imminent death, a frozen moment of brutal finality. The flickering lamplight cast long, distorted shadows that danced on the damp stone walls, transforming the sacred space into a theater of Gothic horror. At its center, Colonel Sebastian Moran stood as the high priest of a dark, vengeful ceremony, the sacrificial knife gleaming in his hand. His victim, Lord Vance, a bound and helpless offering on the altar of his own creation. For a heartbeat, Holmes and I stood frozen in the shadows of the entrance, silent witnesses to the final act of Moran's diabolical play. The air was thick with a palpable tension, a silence so profound that I could hear the frantic pounding of my own heart. We had won the race against time by the slimmest of margins. A few seconds later, and we would have been witnesses not to an impending murder, but to its grim aftermath. It was Holmes who broke the spell. His voice, when he spoke, was not loud, but it cut through the silence of the chapel with the sharp, clear authority of a judge passing sentence. "That is far enough, Colonel Moran," he said. The effect of his words was electric. Moran froze, his hand still raised, his body tensing like a coiled spring. The two guards, who had been watching their master with a brutish, impassive interest, spun around, their faces a mixture of shock and alarm. Lord Vance, who had been slumped in his chair in a state of near unconsciousness, slowly raised his head, a flicker of dawning, incredulous hope in his weary eyes. Moran turned, his movements slow, deliberate, and filled with a chilling reptilian grace. His face, when it was finally revealed in the wavering lamplight, was a mask of cold, controlled fury. There was no surprise in his eyes, only a flicker of annoyance, as if our sudden appearance were a minor, unforeseen complication in an otherwise flawless plan. "Holmes," he said, his voice a low, purring baritone that dripped with a venomous courtesy. "The consulting detective. I should have known. It seems the rumors of your demise were, as they so often are, greatly exaggerated. I confess I am disappointed. I had hoped the Thames would have provided a more permanent solution to my little problem." "Your problem, Colonel?" Holmes replied, stepping forward into the light, his own revolver now held steady in his hand, "is not with me. It is with the truth, a commodity you have spent a lifetime trying to avoid." The two men faced each other across the length of the chapel. Two intellectual titans on opposing sides of a moral abyss. The air crackled with the force of their combined wills. A silent, invisible battle that was as intense as any physical confrontation. Moran's eyes, small and hard as obsidian chips, flickered from Holmes to me, then to the dark, empty space behind us. He was assessing the situation, his mind working with the cold, calculating precision of a master strategist. "So, you have come alone," he mused, a thin, cruel smile playing on his lips. "Brave, but foolish. A miscalculation that will prove to be your last. You have walked into my web, Mr. Holmes, and I am afraid you will not be walking out." He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod to his two guards. The men, who had been momentarily paralyzed by our sudden appearance, now sprang into action. They were large, powerful men, their faces set in grim, determined lines. They moved to flank us, their intention clear, to cut off our escape and to crush us with sheer, brute force. But Holmes had anticipated this move. "Now, Watson," he cried, his voice ringing with a sudden, urgent command. I did not need to be told twice. As the first of the guards charged towards me, his cudgel raised, I fired my revolver. I did not aim to kill, but to incapacitate. The bullet struck the man in the shoulder, the impact spinning him around and sending him crashing to the stone floor with a cry of pain and surprise. Holmes, in the same instant, dealt with the second guard. He did not fire his weapon, but instead, with a surprising burst of speed and agility, he sidestepped the man's clumsy charge and brought the butt of his pistol down on the back of his neck. The man grunted, his knees buckling, and collapsed in a heap. The entire exchange had taken less than 5 seconds. The 2 guards were neutralized, and we were left facing Moran, a man who was far more dangerous than his 2 brutish henchmen combined. Moran hadn't moved during the brief violent scuffle. He had watched with a detached, almost academic interest, his expression unchanging. The defeat of his men did not seem to concern him. It was as if they were mere pawns, their loss an insignificant setback in the larger game. "Impressive," he said, his voice still a low conversational purr. "You are, I concede, a man of many talents, Mr. Holmes. But this is not a street brawl. This is a battle of wits, a contest of wills. And in that arena, you are no match for me." He still held the knife in his hand, its blade gleaming in the lamplight. But he made no move to use it. He was a man who preferred the more subtle, more intellectual forms of violence. "You believe you have won," he continued, his voice dripping with a condescending arrogance. "You believe you have unraveled my little plan, but you have only seen the surface, the superficial layers of the conspiracy. You have not yet grasped the true artistry of my design." "Oh, I believe I have, Colonel," Holmes countered, his voice cold and sharp. "Your design is as transparent as it is diabolical. You used the legitimate grievances of a group of broken men to eliminate your former partners in crime. You created a society of vengeful ghosts, and you appointed yourself their king. And now, with your enemies dead and your army dismantled, you intended to stage your own death, to disappear from the world, a free man with a fortune in stolen gold." Moran's smile widened, a flicker of genuine, if perverse, amusement in his eyes. "Very good, Mr. Holmes. Very good indeed. You have a talent for narrative. A pity it will die with you in this forgotten, God-forsaken chapel." He began to circle the room, his movements slow and deliberate, like a tiger stalking its prey. He was a man in complete control, his confidence unshaken, his arrogance absolute. "But you have missed the final, most elegant detail of my plan," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The part that elevates it from a mere crime to a work of art. You see, Mr. Holmes, I was not just going to disappear. I was going to be reborn as a hero." He paused, savoring the moment, his eyes fixed on Holmes's face. "Imagine the headlines, Mr. Holmes. The last victim of the Crimson Shadow. Colonel Moran, the brave officer who fought to expose the conspiracy, finally falls to the vengeful society he tried to stop. I would have been a martyr, a legend. My name would have been cleared, my reputation restored. And I would have been free to enjoy my fortune, a new man in a new world, with a new identity. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of the plan was staggering. He was not just a murderer, not just a thief. He was a master of public perception, a man who understood the power of a good story. A brilliant plan, Colonel, Holmes conceded, his voice tinged with a note of grudging admiration. But a plan with one fatal flaw. Oh? Moran said, raising an eyebrow. And what might that be? Me, Holmes replied simply. The two men stared at each other. The tension in the room stretched to the breaking point. The battle of wits had reached its climax. And then the physical struggle began. Moran, realizing that he could not outwit Holmes, that his carefully constructed world was crumbling around him, finally abandoned his pretense of civilized discourse. His face contorted into a mask of pure animalistic rage, and with a guttural roar, he lunged at Holmes, the knife held high. He was a man possessed, his movements a blur of speed and violence. He was a trained soldier, a big-game hunter, a man who was no stranger to physical conflict. But Holmes was prepared. He had been anticipating this moment, the inevitable descent from intellectual jousting to brutal hand-to-hand combat. He met Moran's charge not with brute force, but with a calm, calculated precision. He sidestepped the wild, slashing arc of the knife, and, using a technique of Japanese wrestling I had never before seen him employ, he used Moran's own momentum against him. He grabbed Moran's wrist, twisted it, and sent the larger man stumbling forward, his balance broken. The knife clattered to the stone floor, its deadly purpose unfulfilled. But Moran was far from defeated. He was a creature of pure, primal instinct, and he recovered with a terrifying speed. He spun around, his hands now free, and launched himself at Holmes, his fingers clawing for his throat. The two men became a whirlwind of flailing limbs, a desperate, chaotic struggle in the center of the chapel. They crashed into the old wooden pews, sending them splintering to the floor. They rolled on the cold, dusty stones, their grunts and curses echoing in the sacred space. It was a battle of two contrasting styles. Moran was all brute force and raw, untamed aggression. Holmes was a study in controlled, economical movement. His every action precise, calculated, and designed to exploit his opponent's weaknesses. While this desperate struggle was unfolding, I rushed to the side of Lord Vance. He was still tied to the chair, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and a dawning, fragile hope. I quickly cut his bonds, my hands fumbling with the knots in my haste. "Are you all right, my lord?" I asked, my voice breathless. He nodded, his throat too dry for words. He was weak, emaciated, his body a testament to the long days of his captivity. But he was alive. As I helped him to his feet, my attention was drawn back to the life-or-death struggle in the center of the room. Holmes was beginning to tire. Moran's superior size and strength was starting to take their toll. The colonel had Holmes in a chokehold, his powerful arms wrapped around my friend's neck, his face a mask of triumphant rage. Holmes's face was turning a deathly shade of purple, his breath coming in ragged, desperate gasps. He was losing. I raised my revolver, my intention to put an end to the struggle with a single, well-aimed shot. But the two men were a writhing, inseparable mass. A shot was too risky. I could hit Holmes. I had to do something. I looked around, my eyes searching for a weapon, anything that could turn the tide. my gaze fell upon a heavy iron candelabra that had been knocked to the floor during the struggle. Without a second thought, I grabbed it. It was heavy, unwieldy, but it would have to do. I rushed forward, and with all the strength I could muster, I brought the candelabra down on the back of Moran's head. The blow was a glancing one, but it was enough. Moran cried out in pain and surprise, his grip on Holmes momentarily loosening. It was the opening Holmes needed. He twisted his body, broke free from the chokehold, and drove his elbow into Moran's ribs with a sickening crunch. Moran staggered back, gasping for breath, his face a mask of disbelief. He had underestimated us. He had underestimated the bond between us, the lengths to which we would go to protect each other. He was wounded, but he was not yet beaten. He reached inside his coat and produced a small, deadly derringer, a final, desperate gambit. But as he raised the weapon, the great, heavy doors of the chapel burst open. Standing there, silhouetted against the first faint light of the approaching dawn, was the unmistakable bulldog-like figure of Inspector Lestrade, a squad of uniformed police officers at his back. "It's over, Moran!" Lestrade bellowed, his voice ringing with triumphant authority. "Drop your weapon! You are surrounded!" For a moment, Moran stood frozen, a cornered animal caught in the glare of the hunter's lantern. His eyes darted from Lestrade's men to Holmes, to me. He was trapped, his elaborate plan in ruins, his freedom a fading dream. But Colonel Sebastian Moran was not a man to be taken alive. He was a man of pride, of arrogance, a man who would rather die on his own terms than face the humiliation of a public trial and a hangman's noose. With a final defiant roar, he turned the derringer, not on us, but on himself. But Holmes, even in his exhausted state, was too quick for him. He lunged forward and knocked the weapon from Moran's hand just as it discharged. The bullet went wide, ricocheting off the stone walls of the chapel with a high-pitched whine. The fight was finally over. Moran, his face a mask of utter abject defeat, seemed to shrink, to deflate. The arrogant, confident colonel was gone, replaced by a broken, empty shell of a man. He offered no further resistance as Lestrade's men swarmed into the chapel and took him into custody. The confrontation was over. We had won. As the police led Moran away, a man stripped of his dignity, his grand design in tatters, Holmes and I stood in the center of the ruined chapel, two weary, battered figures in the first light of a new day. Lord Vance, his strength slowly returning, stumbled towards us, his face a mixture of gratitude and a deep, profound shame. "Mr. Holmes," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "you have saved my life, but you have also exposed my soul. I am a man who has lived a lie for 20 years. I do not deserve your help." "It is not for me to judge you, my lord," Holmes replied, his voice soft, his usual sharpness tempered by a weary compassion. "You have a long and difficult road ahead of you, a road of atonement, but you are alive, and that is a gift that many of the men you wronged were not afforded." The confrontation with the colonel was over, but the echoes of his crimes, the long dark shadow of his conspiracy, would linger for a long time to come. We had brought a great villain to justice, but we had also unearthed a story of betrayal and injustice that had tainted the lives of everyone it had touched. The battle was won, but the scars, I knew, would remain.